to complete the slip stitch, you need only one piece of fabric from your sewing sampler pattern, and you need to make sure that you have the seam allowance line drawn on. Before we begin sewing though, we do need to prep this fabric in order to have the right kind of fold to accomplish the slip stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over so that the line that I drew for my stitch line is facing the ironing board. I'm going to fold this fabric back until I see my stitch line. I'm going to fold right on that line and press it in place so that it stays nice and flat. Now I'm going to repeat that one more time, folding over just like this. So I'm folding over the same amount as before. I'm going to press that as well so that it stays nice and flat. And then I end up with a sewing sample piece that is really tiny. This is probably about an inch long, but this is going to have the correct type of fold that we need in order to do the slip stitch correctly. Now that our fabric is prepped, we need a single threaded needle, some straight pins in order to accomplish the stitch. So you want to, even though you've pressed this fold, if you notice it probably wants to pop up a little bit. So we want to pin this down in place. So I'm gonna stick a couple pins in the folded side of our fabric. Just like that. Now, the slip stitch goes back and forth between this fold, this edge right there, and this side of the fabric. So when you're looking at this side of your sample, this is the inside of the garment or the wrong side of the fabric. So we want to start out, I like to start my slip stitch by burying my knot. So by doing that, it makes my knot invisible. So I'm going to go in through the fold right here and come back out. Okay, so now my knot's invisible. Next step is I'm going to go into this side of the fabric, the single side of the fabric. I'm going to go down and back out right next to the fold, and I want to take a little tiny stitch because we want the slip stitch to be mostly invisible from this side, the right side, or the outside of the garment. So I'm going to take a little tiny stitch right here and pull that through. Try not to catch the edge of my fabric. So now you can see on this side I have a little tiny stitch. Now the next step is I want to go into the fold of the fabric right here. So I'm catching the folded edge. And I am just going through the fold, nowhere else. And you can take a slightly longer stitch here. So if you can see, I have not caught this side of the fabric, I am only in the fold. Pull that stitch through. So I'm slipping into the fold and then back out. And when I pull this tight, we actually don't see much of the stitches here. A really good stitcher can make their slip stitch nearly or completely invisible along this edge on the inside of the garment. So now I'm going to go back down, and I like to personally go straight across from wherever my thread's coming out. I could jump down here and take the next stitch, but then I have thread coming out from this point to the next stitch that can be caught. So I like to go right back down into the fabric where my thread came out. Again, I want to take a little stitch on this side so it's mostly invisible on the right side of the garment. Pull that stitch into the fold right where I came out. The trickiest part, especially if you get a nice crisp fold in your fabric, is just getting your needle to slip through the tunnel that your fold creates. Fold side. Main body side. fold side again. This stitch can also be used to close up an opening in like a bag or a stuffy or anything that you needed to stuff. But instead of going through the fold of one side and then in the main fabric of the other, you go between one folded side and another folded side. This stitch can also be known as the ladder stitch. But when you are just doing one fold here, it's commonly called the slip stitch. Whoop, got my tail caught. There are minute differences that do determine whether or not you're actually doing a slip stitch versus a ladder stitch. But for the purposes of the costume shop here at Miami University, those differences really don't make a big impact. They're basically the same thing in my book. I know what the differences are, but you guys don't have to. So we're just going to keep going all the way till we get to the opposite end. If you notice, as I'm going back and forth between my folded side and the flat side of my fabric, the stitches in the main body of my fabric are really tiny, and then the stitches in my fold are a lot longer. This allows me to make the stitches mostly invisible on the right side, but also not take an eternity because every little stitch in the fold side is not itty bitty. Remember, often in theater, when we are sewing something, there is always a chance that what you're sewing is going to need to be undone for an alteration in the future. Now, you can't approach every project assuming it's going to get undone, because it might not be. But it is something to keep in mind that as you work, the way we sew things for theater is often different from personal use, because we know there's a chance that it will get altered in the future. That fold. Whoops. Okay, so learning moment. So I have developed a little bit of a knot in my thread. Often this type of knot forms because the thread is twisting as you pull each of your stitches. And if you're really careful, you can kind of undo the knot. So I'm gonna take my needle. This one's got loops in it. I'm gonna take my needle and pull the loops the opposite direction from where they want to be. Just gently pull. Sometimes that knot will come undone because it's just a French knot. It just twisted on itself. That's what the knot is. It's not actually a proper knot. It's just tangled. But sometimes you can't get it undone, in which case you have to get a new piece of thread, tie off, and begin back where you started. Okay, so for my sample, I'm going all the way to the very end. And I'm going to take one last stitch in the body side of the fabric, not the fold. And that is where I will do my knot. And I do my, it's holding onto the fabric, knot, little loop, go through the loop, pull tight, repeat. And one last stitch just to secure it down. Boop. Going to cut my threads. And that is the slip stitch. We're going to take our pins out. So you can kind of see on this side, little tiny pricks from where we're going back and forth. And on the right side of the fabric, our stitches are mostly pretty small. This one's pretty big. But there's only one row of stitches because I went through the tunnel. I slipped into the fold instead of going all the way through the fold onto this side of the fabric. There you have it. That is how you do a slip stitch.